On today's episode, we'll talk about the job of the sound mixer, iambic pentameter safety meetings, The Sopranos, Nurse Jackie, and of course, mixing an 8th grade middle school production of James and the Giant Peach. Just a little bit of business before we start. There may be a curse word here or there in this episode, so please listen responsibly. As always, our website, theop.io, is up and chock full of tips, tricks, and gooey operator goodness. Make sure to check out The Breakdown, where the best operators in the biz explain shots they have done, The Musings, where we discuss everything from quick tips to larger concepts of storytelling, the answers, the images, and so much more. I may or I may not take a break or two during this episode, but I promise that none of them will be longer than 22 seconds. If you are enjoying the podcast, please follow us, write a review, share us with your parents, and talk us up around the water cooler with your friends. So grab a beverage, sit back, and enjoy the op. Thanks for listening.
Live it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll.
Rolling. Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Mark.
And camera set. And action.
Hello, and welcome back to The Op, the podcast where we talk about operating and the art of visual storytelling. My name is Dave Comides, and I'm your host, and I'm coming to you this morning from really cold Chicago, where it's 1 degree outside, but apparently they say it feels like 27 below, but I think it only feels like 15 below, so I'm not sure where they come up with these numbers. But I say all that to let you know that you may hear the subway going by on the L track outside the window every once in a while. I'm really excited today to have, actually, for the first time, a sound mixer with me. Jan McLaughlin, CAS, who is a noted sound mixer, has been around on a lot of productions. We actually met on a production, 15, 20 years ago or something like that. But she has been nominated for 4 CAS awards, all for the TV show Nurse Jackie, that's the Cinema Audio Society, and also 4 Primetime Emmy Awards, 2 of which she won in 2014 and 2013 for Nurse Jackie. So she's done a couple of things out there. Some of her credits, but not all of them, include Divorce, Happyish, Nurse Jackie, The Sopranos, which is a TV show some people may have heard about, the movie Kids, and because I always like to pull out something that sounds funny, Leningrad Cowboy Meets Moses, which just now I have to look up and watch. Jen, thank you for being here.
Dave, what a thrill to share the airwaves with you, my brother.
Are these airwaves anymore? I don't think they're airwaves. Are they? Well, maybe they are.
Well, I'm saying they are. They're sound waves.
Well, you're the sound person, so I'll take it on you. By the way, I should mention to anybody, Jen is not in freezing Chicago. She's in New York. We're on the internet today, so if there's any internet goodness, that's what's going on. So I haven't seen you in a long time. Was it No, it wasn't Happyish. I know what it was, and I'm gonna bring that up later.
Remind me what it was.
You helped out with. Okay, maybe I'll bring it up now. This is who Jen is. Jen is an award-winning, amazing sound mixer, but also an amazing person, because I was living in Connecticut. Hopefully this rings a bell. And I put something on Facebook that my daughter, who was in 8th grade, was putting on with her friends for the school, James and the Giant Peach. And I just put a thing on Facebook saying, does anybody have any lavalier mics? Thinking stupidly someone could send them to me and I could somehow make them work so they could hear the kids better. And you emailed me back and said, what's going on? And I told you, and you said, well, I have a new Tesla and I want to see how far it can drive. So why don't I just come out with some lavalier mics? And you came out for, I think, the rehearsal, if I'm correct, and brought, I don't know, how many mics did you bring?
Lots.
and a sound mixing board and the whole thing, and set everything up for this 8th grade school play, and then came back, 2 days later and live mixed for the whole audience. It was amazing. It was fantastic.
It was an amazing thing to have done in every respect.
I tell that story often. I'm so glad I get to tell it here. I apologize for hijacking the beginning of your podcast with it, but I think it lets people know. No,
that was a thrilling moment for me, truly, to meet those kids. I know why. There are about 3 or 4 productions that I've been trying to get rid of because I don't remember them. I think somehow they got on there and I can't get rid of them to save my life. It's Terrible.
Getting rid of stuff on IMDb is just, it doesn't happen. But I just remember how amazed and excited the kids were. And it's one of the things that I love about this business is because like you came out because you love working with sound and were able to help someone. I love that. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it made my life better.
So tell me your story. How'd you get here?
Because you sent me that question in advance, I got to dream about it for a night while I thought about that question, and I realized it would give me an opportunity to say the name of this club. I'm calling it a club, but it's actually the Grand Falloon Ice Cream Saloon on the eastern shore of Maryland, Virginia, where I was a regular attendee because they had live bands. And as a result of being a regular attendee, got to know the band and then eventually ended up roadieing for them.
How old are you at this point?
Oh, God.
Ballpark?
Early 20s.
Okay.
I did that for them for a long time. Now, during the day, I was working as a legal secretary. And then at night, I would go and roadie for these guys. So I'm getting 4 hours of sleep a night, but worth it. And I think that there came a time when after several months, the band agreed to give me $3 a night for my roadie work, which was a huge thrill. I'm like, oh my God, I've made it.
That's so great.
I know, right? And this is sometime in the early 70s. And I'm just sort of pulling that figure out of.
Sure, but I love the fact that like you can't even go back and go, but back then $3 was $6, so it's not quite what you think it is today.
Well, those guys were probably making $5 each.
I'm sure.
So I felt like I was near the top of the pay scale. But they would let me play. They'd let me open for them, and then play during their breaks. So, as a beginning solo artist, that sort of added to the paycheck psychologically.
What did you play?
Anyway,
What instrument did you play?
I played guitar.
Wow.
And that comes out of the fact that on the Delmarva Peninsula, we didn't get radio or TV. Stations didn't reach.
Wait,
so
what's the Delmarva Peninsula?
Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. Delmarva.
Oh, I've never heard that before. Okay.
Yeah. As a local, I suppose maybe that might have been local stuff. But out of boredom, I began to learn how to play guitar better. And I never really learned to play well, as it turns out, but I had hopes. But then moving forward, the first gear I ever bought was with those guys with their expertise. I bought a mixing board and, started my, and I became a gearhead. So by the time I got back to Pennsylvania, I had the gear. And that, as a gearhead, that was the beginning of my career. Became unafraid of electronics, and that was the first step. And after coming to New York, continuing, I came back to New York because I was by then married and had to come.
So how old were you when you came to New York?
So this is probably 84, 85. So
New York was not the New York of today. It was a rough place back then.
Oh, it was rough.
Yeah. I remember going to New York, and like that was back when the subways were all graffitied still, and it was, I think Warriors had just come out, so that's what everybody thought of New York as, and
What was the one with not Bronx Tale, where the guy takes a wrong turn off the.
Was it just called the Bronx?
Cross Bronx.
But something like, I know what you're talking about, and goes to a horrible neighborhood, which the Bronx was for a long time.
Came out, and a friend asked me to meet them off of Bleecker Street somewhere, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going down there.
Down to the village?
No.
How long did it take you living in New York to get used to like I can get around, and I'm not afraid of New York. It's not as bad as it seems or whatever.
It was actually the film business that
Sure.
drove that out of my heart because, I was really highly motivated and just went anywhere, 5 a.m, because you had to go there to pick up the van.
Mm-hmm.
Usually down at Broadway and was it Canal? No, Broadway
Could be. No,
Houston. Broadway and Houston.
There you go. Yeah.
It's where the crew vans would pick you up. And that sort of made me more fearless. Of course, too, the fact that there was a crew there, my family was there to protect me.
Sure. And for anybody who lives in New York or visited New York today, when you think, why would someone be worried about going down to Broadway and Houston? It does not look like it does today. There were not $20 million apartments down there on any level. It was a much scarier place for sure.
Yeah, it was deserted.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, my ex-husband was a native New Yorker, born and raised, and of course, fearless.
So, yeah.
And he made sure that I had memorized the avenues, cross streets you can get, but he made sure that I memorized all the avenues and that I would find visual things that when I came up out of a subway, look up and find
Smart.
The Empire State. So he taught me the little details that would get me around.
Yeah, it's also worth pointing out that you didn't have a little phone with a map on it. And if you stood on a street corner with a map out, you were a target. So you were not doing that, right?
Well, my idea as a country girl, I literally am from a little teeny town.
Uh-huh.
I was like, well, fewer people is better. And he's like, no, you want to go where there's more people.
Yep. You learn all that pretty quickly. So how did you get into how did you make the jump into the film industry?
I had taken a job at a big rental house, the rental house that rented the gear for the Olympics.
Okay.
And would rent the sound gear for things like Tapomania, which was right outside Macy's. So we would set up a sound system all along an entire block with the music playing so that 5,000 or 10,000 people could do tap dancing live.
Wow.
Things like that. So I'm in there, pick up, return department, troubleshooting, testing, repairing stuff, because I had by then taken a course at NYU's School of Continuing Education toward learning the syntax of film language, because my ex and I were doing little short poetry films.
Oh, cool.
And I realized that I didn't know the language well enough, so I took classes, and I was the only one out of our class of 50 that was interested in sound. Everybody else wanted to be a DP or a director. Like, well, I'm a gearhead. I'll do it.
Yeah.
And competition being what it was, which wasn't for sound because nobody wanted to be doing sound, I got a lot of experience, and that led me directly into looking for that particular job.
Yeah.
And it came to me that if I wanted to do work in film, I should call some people. So from being in school, I was delivered the production guide or whatever, a little catalog.
There was a New York production guide, I think it was called. It was like the LA 411 sort of, but smaller.
Yeah, so anybody with a little business would advertise in there. Yep. So they had sound mixers in there. I started calling them up. Early call was to Joel Holland, who I'm still in contact with. And he said, well, hey, why don't you just come on down and meet us at this particular thing at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'll talk to you. So it was the set of, an order.
The original.
The original. The beginning of season 2,
okay,
which involved early days. I guess George Zunza had pissed off Dick Wolf sufficiently, and I'm making this up, by the way, that his character was assassinated.
Okay.
And so one of the first things we did over there at the 23rd Street stages was rain towers and his body double dead on the street.
That was the first thing you showed up for, you mean?
Well, it was probably the second thing. Like early in the morning, we were out on the street, and then we moved back to the stage.
Sure, but still, a cool first day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, big time. Well, we're walking. We had a rolling move to somewhere, and I asked Joel, I said, so where can I go to the bathroom? And he said, well, what do you mean? You didn't go before you came? So that was lesson number 1 in the film business.
Yeah, okay.
So I should have taken that to heart.
That's great.
God bless Joel. He taught me everything I needed to know, and that was a big leg up.
How great that you called him and he was just like, come on down, let me show you how this works. That's fantastic.
Well, it went further because at the end of the day, they gave me an invitation for the next day in the form of a call sheet. So I came back.
Wow.
And I did that for probably 3 or 4 months. My job at first was to go and pick up takeout for the sound department.
Okay.
That was all I did. And eventually, Bill Daly was the sound mixer. And he said, well, go take inventory on the truck. So I had to count out all the cables. And, well, you can clean the cables now. So I cleaned all of his cables. And everything was cabled back then.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, I'm thrilled. And then I got to open all the cases, clean the cases, take all the old tape off the cases. And then we came up to his hiatus where he brought everything back home and really went deep cleaning into cleaning the mixer and stuff. So, yeah, I was thrown in. I just kept coming back.
Not knowing the sound world enough, is the stuff that you had done before for live music and other stuff, did you look at most of this equipment and sort of know what it was, or was it completely foreign to you?
Well, there were certain things. For example, an XLR cable was called a Canon. The connector was called a Canon cable in the music world.
Yeah.
In film, it was XLR. So that it was little words.
So you knew what it was, but they called it something different. So if they called for it, you went, what is that? And then you could figure it out or something.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I figured it out easily enough. Signal flow is signal flow. Okay.
Gotcha. And so did you eventually and actually I should have asked you, Joel was the boom operator, I'm assuming, on that show.
He was third.
He was the third. Okay.
Yeah. David Platt, who's now a director for the Dick Wolf's franchises, among other things. Dave Platt was the boom operator. And, I remember early on, at the end of the day, wrapping, these 100-foot cables. And Dave Platt comes up behind me and whispers in my ear, you're going to have to wrap that a hell of a lot faster than that if you're going to be of any use to us at all. I mean, so this was tough love, man. Yeah. So I spent the next 2 weeks taking cables out and just all day wrapping, throwing it out, unwrapping it till I got fast and good at wrapping long cables.
That's great. Were you one of, at that time, were you one of the few women in a technical position?
I wasn't in a technical position.
Well,
Frank, I mean, because Law and Order, their contract back then was not, I don't think it can't have been 52. It had to have been NABIT, maybe.
The
I think
union
early on.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
So they were a little bit different, more open flavor because they had organized as a fuck you to the IATSE. If I don't think that I'm talking out of school with that, but yeah, there were some people who lost love.
Yep. For anybody who doesn't know about this, these are two of the major unions there that were in New York for a while, and I guess still are on some level. Although NABIT really isn't what it used to be, or does NABIT still exist? Actually,
I think NABIT got sucked up and into
something else.
IATSE.
Okay.
At one point.
Anyway, but so there were more women on the crew on a NABIT show than on an IATSE.
No, there were I think the script supervisor was a woman.
Okay.
I don't think there were any women.
Oh,
maybe someone in props.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm trying to remember now. I hadn't thought about the gender division on that show.
I only ask because it's changed significantly, and I'm never sure when that change began, and it's a little.
Well, it wasn't back then.
Yeah. So it stood out that you were a woman on the crew, or with the crew, I should say, at that point.
Well, even on Sopranos, it was Christine G. who was the script supervisor, and me, and we were often the only women on set.
Really?
And it became really apparent when we were at the Bada Bing, the strip club.
The strip club. Okay.
It became very obvious, and not least of which because I was doing playback, which put me up on a mezzanine level where I had an overview of the bar.
Sure.
So I'm seeing all the men
Yep.
and the dancers, and it became very clear that there were no other women besides the men
besides
sitting
the
at the bar.
and the two of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow. So did you originally did you start, was the first thing you did in the sound crew officially as a boom operator then?
I guess I would have been an intern on Law and Order.
Yeah.
And I stopped doing that when I was offered a mixing job.
Oh, wow.
And I think about during that time interning on Law and Order, I bought a Nagra, a mono Nagra.
Can you explain what a Nagra is to people who might not know?
A Nagra was a brilliant Swiss engineered objet d'art. By bad French pronunciation, it was this engineer Kudelski, genius stuff. It was the first machine that could sync with film.
Sound recording device, right? And what was it recorded on? Like what?
Tape. It was reel to reel quarter-inch tape.
Yeah. It's funny you describe it that way because I never looked closely at it, but I remember every time I would see an Nagra, like the times that it would come off the cart because they had to carry it or something or whatever, it was a really beautiful piece of equipment.
An exquisitely beautiful machine, very beautifully and reliably made.
Yeah.
I just sold my oldest machine. It was a Nagra 3, if I'm not mistaken. That was the first machine I bought and the last machine I sold.
Wow, that's amazing. And that was, unless I'm mistaken, that was kind of from what I remember, that was the only sound recording device that I ever saw used until digital changed things.
Digital, that was the moment.
Were there other things than the Nagra that I'm not aware of, or was that just, it was so good that was it?
I think that was it.
Yeah, I can't ever think of not seeing that on the sound mixer's cart.
Yep. When DAT came out, that was really the next big thing. Stella DAT came out with a DAT machine there were a bunch of different DAT manufacturers.
Digital recorders, right? Yeah. But it's amazing because that was a chunk of time when that was the only game in town that was being used. Now that I think about it, because I want to hear more about where you went with your career, but just because you mentioned it, can you explain to people what the job of the sound mixer is?
It's the sound mixer's responsibility to capture the performances of the artists. We preserve for posterity their utterances in a form that may be used, and giving all the elements that post-production will need to make that performance whole.
So you're sitting back there behind the mixer and you're listening with headphones. Do you have to know all the dialogue?
I do not necessarily, but the boom operator and my principal boom operator, Brendan O'Brien,
I love Brendan.
He's astounding as a human being, a diplomat, and many other things.
Yep.
He has a photographic memory.
I didn't know that, but that doesn't surprise me.
Correct,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
unaware of it myself until we had been working together for 5 years or so. And I said, how do you? And he said, oh, yeah, I have a photographic memory. I was like,
So
you
he's looking at
cheater.
he's looking at the script in his mind as they're saying it. In fairness, or I should say, that doesn't seem fair, because when all the rest of us have to struggle to write it on our hands and everything, but good for him.
Well, you as an operator for sure have to know it well, don't you?
That's why by the end of the day, though, I have words written all over the palm of my hands, because I can't remember. It's the last line of so-and-so where I have to whip over. I always have it written because I can't remember dialogue. But so you're listening and you're basically writing the levels as they're going.
Yes. Back in the old days, when I first started mixing, it was mono, which meant I had to mix it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to use it.
Oh, I see
for
what
one
you're
reason
saying.
or another.
Because it was all being recorded on the same track. So if something didn't work, that was it. There was no other
Yeah.
option. Well, I didn't
Yeah.
think about it. Amazing.
Yeah, and then it went to 2-track,
Yeah.
which meant the same thing. I'd still have to mix it. So I grew up as a mixer, actually mixing. Now that
Yeah.
has changed significantly. Now it's sort of turned into a sausage making machine that you are the sound mixers are making sure that the ISO tracks, which means productions now expect the mixer to have wired everyone on the scene, and your responsibility is on the factory line making sure that nobody's levels are too quiet or too hot.
So you're adjusting them as they go, but you could be, if you have 8 people in a scene, you could be adjusting eight microphones all the time, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. When you were back doing it and it was just mono, was there stress in having to do that?
Well, at first, yeah, I was scared to death for years before. But I wasn't dealing with 8 mics for 8 speaking parts. I was
Sure.
dealing with one microphone, from one boom operator, and the max might be on top of that 2 plant mics.
Gotcha.
Heavy, for example, my earliest intersection with putting a plant mic was the boom operator could cover everything except when Liv Tyler went back to the back of the set at this window to the kitchen. So I took a 416, which was my only extra mic, and I mounted it up in the corner just outside a camera frame to catch her line at the window. So I had to bring that up as she approached it.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, this may be a silly question, but again, I don't ever really see what you guys do, because I'm always obviously out on the floor and you're back somewhere else. And I sort of come back to say something occasionally, or I talk to you at lunch, but that's about it. Is there something, when you have a lot of people going, is there something akin to being a musician to riding all those levels? Is there a correlation there?
Yeah, the music, absolutely. My music background absolutely helped me as a mixer.
Yeah.
Because the actors definitely establish the rhythm of the dialogue. So I plug into the rhythm and respond. And that's why it's good to have a rehearsal, because you can reinforce it's eye, ear, hand coordination.
Yep.
And that's in part why I would wire the actors myself. A lot of mixers now have their third and or boom operators wire people. I want to know exactly where that is in my mind's layout of what I'm hearing here. I need to know where it is.
Oh, wow. So that informs the way that you mix, knowing how far away or where it is on their body.
Exactly. So I'm watching a monitor, and if I see them go like this and the microphone's here, I know to pull that down.
Oh, so if their head goes down, they're going to, that I never would have thought about that. That's amazing.
Actors don't think about that. Sometimes I've had to say, And I'm sure I'll tell you when they learn it is when they go to do ADR, because they've gotten too close and overloaded the microphone when they
learn it quickly. ADR is
yeah.
automatic dialogue replacement, which as a director, I was in one of those, and it was horrible because they watch themselves on screen and try to recreate that. And no matter how good they are, it's never quite right. It's just not the same. Yeah.
Say it again. Say that again, David.
ADR, from my experience, is never as good as live. Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I can tell when I'm watching something when it goes ADR, especially when it's bad, it's horrible, it takes you out of it. But you mentioned something about watching your monitor. When you started out, did you have a monitor back then, or did you start out before people had monitors?
No, I did not early on.
Yeah. So did you then? Were you positioned in such a way so that you could see the set, or were you just listening?
I think I tried both, because what did I know?
Yeah.
I mean, despite the fact that I had paid pretty good attention on Law and Order watching Bill Daly work, but he had enough wires to cover however many he would need. But he had a monitor, and I didn't have enough brain space for what I was ingesting to put that together. But yeah, I probably tried both and realized it's easier if you can actually see what's going on. I mean, Bill had a unique way of doing it, though. He had what they called Big Brother, which was a wide angle camera that he would put up so that he could have an overview of the set.
Like a witness cam almost. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
interesting. That he used every time we were out on location. That was his signature move that I never followed, because it was just, I didn't have a third for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's great. Wow. I'm sure other people must have done that, but I was never aware of it. That's fantastic. You also mentioned something that I thought was interesting, which is learning the rhythm of the scene, because I'll say, as a Steadicam operator, when I go in there, and you mentioned something that I if nothing ever comes out of this podcast, I hope this comes out of it, how important rehearsals are. And it's not only so, and I wonder if this is the same for you. It's not only for me so that I can learn, the positions and figure out what everybody's doing and whatever, but it's also so that the actors can get into a rhythm, because the good stuff happens when they're finally in a rhythm and they're no longer thinking, I got to walk, and they're hitting it every time. And then you can just build on that, because I find that, for me, I find that, like, there's sort of a clunkiness to the first two, and then around 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 or something like that is where everything starts to gel. And I'm wondering, is it the same for sound?
Oh yeah. I can't land it until they land it. So if they don't land the rhythm, then I haven't landed my rhythm.
Yeah.
Either.
It's amazing how much rhythm has to do with that, and just getting into something that's consistent, to where you can the building blocks are all going to be there, and then you can just finesse it because you know that the other stuff is going to happen.
Well, it's a dance, as you've often said.
Yep.
Particularly as a Steadicam guy. And if the actors are establishing the music to the dance, until they've established the music in something that's repeatable regularly, you can't possibly join the ballet.
Agreed. So, you know what? When I put this out, I'm going to point out that the two things that should come out of this, if nothing else, are ADR sucks and rehearsals are absolutely important. So hopefully we've made our point here.
Well, they're important unless, they know, all right, it doesn't cost them much to do a couple and throw them out, except that it adds to the stress.
There's no question. There's an incalculable aspect to that just is there and changes things, right?
Well, I think all of us who work in this business want to be good at it.
Yeah.
We want to give you a beautiful product. And when we're forced to give you a less than beautiful product, it hurts.
Yeah. That actually nails it on the head. And it's because I know I'm always super frustrated when we can't do the best work because we're not given the time or we're not given the ability, and yet they expect it. And it's almost personal, right? I mean, you fight to let it not be, but you just want to do your best work. And for me, I don't know about you, it's not that I'm worried that someone's going to see it and say, oh, Dave is a bad camera operator. It's that I have an opportunity to do something really good and I can't do it because of someone else's failings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's painful.
It is, but that's and then you move on to the next one, right?
Exactly.
So backing up. So your first mixing job. Do you remember what that was?
Well, early on, clearly early on, I took my new Nagra and my new, literally brand new used 416 microphone that I bought about the same time, and it was going to be outside, so I had bought an equally new Zeppelin that I had never assembled or disassembled before because I picked it up that day.
Okay.
And they're paying me, I think, $50. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm being paid and I can't figure out how to open the thing.
Oh, geez.
So I'm losing my shit. And I called Joel, get Joel on the phone. Thank God he answered. Thank God I had his number. I said, Joe, what do I, and he had to explain to me, oh, you twist it. And I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. So yeah. So I'm doing all this.
The Zeppelin was the thing you had to open up, put the microphone inside and then close it back up to protect it. Right. So
yeah, to keep the wind off it. And so I'm
God.
trying to do this without the people who are employing me knowing that I'm losing it. And I was actually losing my mind.
But apparently you got it. So do you remember what this was, though? Do you remember the show?
No, it wasn't a show. It was, I don't even remember what it was. It was probably some kind of documentary thing. But boy, oh boy, those people certainly did not hire me again.
Yeah. Okay. Did you not know what you were doing? I mean, were you able to pull it off, though?
Well, let's put it this way. I got the machine to work.
Yeah. Okay.
I have no idea if it was any good or not. Most certainly not.
And this was what year, you think, ballpark?
Probably 90. Let's see, maybe like late 80s, early 90s.
And so did you basically go on from there and just continue to mix on things as you learned, or?
Yeah, I kind of declared myself a mixer right out of the chute.
Yeah.
I didn't really do any boom operating until flash forward a decade or more later when John McCormick, a production sound mixer in New York, called me and said, can you boom? And I'm like, no. Well, I just, you'll be fine. Come on in, because he's a man of eternal optimism and loyalty.
And that's a skill set that you wouldn't have as a mixer, right? I mean, that's a completely, you still understand sound, but yeah, that's a completely different thing.
Oh my goodness. The exigencies of performing well as a boom operator, you actually have to deal with the operator and the focus puller.
And the actors.
And in the center of the frying pan, which is much too close to the fire for my taste.
Was that sort of a shock getting thrown into that?
Oh my God, I wanted to kill myself every night. Thankfully, it didn't last long.
Okay.
Because I feel sure John realized my skill set laid elsewhere. But he invited me back to be a third, which was another learning experience. But Johnny, like I said, Johnny has been a true gentleman and mentor to many, many, many good sound people in New York.
That's great. Did being a boom operator, do you think, did that help you as a mixer, having actually done that and realizing more of what it is?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, not in a very thoughtful way because my brain space was limited to be able to ingest all the information I was taking in, but I definitely grew.
And so how long did it take you as a mixer from when that first disastrous time until you sort of could go on a set and go, I know what I'm doing. I'm not worried. I got this figured out. And
It wasn't until after my first Emmy
oh, really?
that I walked back onto Nurse Jackie.
Yeah.
And felt like I was all right.
Wow. So
seriously.
And by then, by your first Emmy win, you'd already done even Nurse Jackie for a couple of years, or at least a year, right?
Oh yeah, bunch. Well, the Nurse Jackie Emmys didn't come until sort of near I think it was season 6, maybe.
Wow. Okay.
That it was weird because it was late in its life that it came for me.
Yeah.
So
that must have been an amazing feeling to wake up and hear that you've been nominated for something like that.
I didn't believe it. I mean, I seriously thought this is a mistake, because I think what happened is I got it, but my phone started blowing up with text messages, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And I had to try to find it, and then I realized that it was true. Well, this is still a mistake, but there it is.
That's fantastic. And you were nominated for 4 times for that show and won twice, right?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up on IMDb. You looked at it, but
I think that's what I saw. But that's amazing. That sounds like, was that a great show to work on?
Oh my gosh, best job ever. In fact, I just heard from Anna DeVere Smith overnight. She sent me a picture from that job, and that was my response.
That's fantastic. What made it such a great show?
The crew, the cast. Edie Falco as number 1 was divine. The cast there was so much love there for them, for each other, and their love for their roles and their professions.
That's great.
It was brilliant.
Yeah. And then you got to work with Edie Falco again on The Sopranos.
Well, I had worked with her on Sopranos first.
Oh, sorry. Sopranos was first.
Yeah.
And then Nurse Jackie. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about Sopranos, because I often wonder, when you were doing that, did you do it from the pilot or from the first season?
No, I came in, I think somewhere in season 2, maybe.
Okay.
Peter Schneider, who's since gone on to be one of the owners of Gotham Sound.
Okay.
Peter Schneider was thirding, and I had been filling in for Peter when he was unavailable. So when Peter then went on to actually execute his dream with Gotham Sound, Matthew Price invited me to replace Peter on his absence.
And was that a good experience, that show?
Oh my God. Yeah, it was a great job. It was difficult because we had second meal every day.
So you were working long hours. Well, like, what's an average day hour-wise on that show?
Well, it was like 14-hour days on the regular.
That's rough.
And honestly, I knew it was exhausting when driving from Brooklyn to New Jersey one day, instead of the eye drops that I meant to put in my eye, I picked up my nasal spray and put it in my eye, which was ultimately a big mistake.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was that kind of exhaustion.
Yeah, it's time for a day off. That's one of the amazing things about this business, is we work these hours and somehow we pull it off. I don't understand it. It's gotten a little better, but it's not gotten to the place that it should, of course.
No, getting home and back is a challenge.
Yeah.
That's in part why I bought the Tesla, because I had hopes that automated driving would help me, and ultimately it did.
Yeah,
because I was driving to work, and a BMW full of car thieves on the Cross Bronx
Yeah.
rammed into my car from behind. I'm on my way to work, and the witness who stopped to hold my hand for an hour
Oh my gosh.
afterwards said he thought they were going 100 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, the upside was I had video, not only of the accident, but of them abandoning the car in the middle lane of the Cross Bronx and walking off out the exit.
You mean
So
video
that-
from the Tesla because it's recording.
Yes.
Wow.
So
Oh,
it
wow.
caught them not only walking up behind the car, walking out the exit, and they never let me know if they got them. But the police detective who was on it, we had enough contact that they were determined to get those guys because that
Yeah.
it was a big deal.
That's amazing. I didn't. It's funny. I never even thought about the fact that the Tesla's recording stuff all the time. It's another plus of that car, I guess. So you mentioned working in the Bada Bing. You could probably hear the L in the background. You mentioned working in the Bada Bing and that there weren't that many women on the crew. And for anybody who doesn't realize, we sort of said it before, the Bada Bing, which is one of the best named clubs on TV, I think, was a strip club that they owned. I guess it was like their money laundering place or something like that, or they just hung out there or whatever. But that was their headquarters.
All of the above.
Yeah, probably. Was that? I mean, it was a different time in the film industry than it is now. There's HR stuff and there's this and there's that. Was that just, did you go in there as part of the female crew and just go, okay, this is going to be sort of raunchy and guys aren't going to hold their tongues and I'm just going to get through it? Or was there respect for the fact that there were women on the crew there? Or was it just sort of being in a strip club for the crew?
Nobody anywhere thought about the fact that there were any women on the crew.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt lucky that I was at least up a level,
Removed
by
right?
myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really didn't enjoy it much.
Yeah. I would imagine that those women on stage are probably, I'm assuming maybe they're strippers who they hire to do that work. So people are probably talking to them the way that they would talk to strippers in a club, I would imagine, on some level.
I have no idea because
Yeah.
I was well away from it, which is where I
Gotcha.
wanted to be.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you remember the point where there started to be more women on sets?
Well, I remember specifically the women who were there. Is it Sarah Black? Is an electrician.
Okay.
And there was also a grip woman whose name is escaping me at the moment. But when they would show up, I'd be like, "Holy crap, tits!"
So that was that's hilarious. So, but that was a bit like when a female electrician or a female grip showed up. That was actually like you noticed it.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I mean, did I say anything really? Not really.
No, but you were just happy to see that women were in those positions. It's you know what the great thing to hear is I don't even pay it. I mean, I don't know that I ever paid that much. I'm sure at some point I went, oh my gosh, there's a woman in the grip crew or whatever. Now it doesn't even faze me because they're in, women are in every crew position there is. So, which is great. It's the way it should be.
Exactly. This is what I'm hoping for, the days when they won't say the female sound mixer, they'll just say the sound mixer.
Sound mixer. Yeah.
Please, come on.
That's exactly right. I think let's put it this way. I think we're closer to it now than we were when you started out. There's no question about that. I wanted to ask you on your IMDb, it does say that you worked on America's Next Top Model. And the only reason I ask you about that is I have to imagine, and I have to say, I've never seen the show, but I can sort of figure out from the name of it what it is and that it's a reality show. I have to think that as a mixer, that's a totally different animal than The Sopranos or Nurse Jackie or something like that. Is that an accurate assessment?
It's not even the same, it's a separate species.
Do you have multiple? I mean, how many mics do you have going at any given time that you're keeping track of?
Well, let me just say I was not a mixer on that. I was the A2, which meant
is what?
it was, I would show up first thing in the morning to wire the ladies after they peed.
Okay. Because they're wearing next to nothing most of the time, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Well, the deal was after they peed, they would get dressed enough, and that I guess they put on more clothes. I don't remember exactly, but they had two women who were their masters. And I don't say that word lightly. I say that word heavily.
Okay.
Because honestly, it was one of the most disheartening experiences of my life as a person on the crew.
Really?
Yeah, principally because the women were locked in to an apartment overnight with people who were there to make sure they were okay, but they were locked in. So I would come in the morning, and there were times when I arrived and there was no one there. So they were with, I mean, miles of electrical cables. The whole place was lit up.
Oh, sure. Okay.
All by themselves.
Wow.
And that made me furious.
It's like being in an aquarium.
Well, being in an aquarium with a gallon of poison.
Yeah.
Or maybe a box of salt.
Yeah.
That could potentially leak, but you don't know until it does.
Wow. That's incredible. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I was very disappointed.
The dark side of all these shows. But the question that I was going to ask you, because you said, I didn't realize you weren't the mixer on that. So when you're working on something like that, is a big part of the thing, where do you put a mic pack so it's not going to be shown? And I mean, is there a lot of strategizing about that?
Well, I strategize every time I put a microphone and pack on someone.
Yeah.
Basically, good morning, give me a turn, let me see what you got going on. And there's presumably, I usually made it a rule to have a costumer there with me.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
To advise, because and they would oftentimes be able to help me, but there was no costumer on America's Next Top Model.
Gotcha. And then for the mixer though, do they have like 15, 20 microphones like flying at times where they're keeping levels on everything?
Well, the way they worked that out was, every model had a lavalier, and the way the mixers and receivers were set up, they could adjust their frequencies. So part of it was having a list of the actresses and their frequencies. So when one actress would leave and another arrive in front of camera, they would adjust their receivers' frequencies to be able to dial in.
Wow.
The one that came in. So that was part of the mixer's jobs.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. But as a show, that sounds sort of horrific. I understand.
Well, that's not even the worst. The worst was they had still photographers. Part of the show was you work your way up doing all these different things, and then you would be photographed by a professional still photographer, because they're models. So you have the still day. So one day, for example, we're shooting in the meat packing district, and they had the girls dressed in meat dresses.
Dresses made out of meat, like actual meat on their body. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then at lunch, because when the still photographer would come, because they are some kind of higher being, they would actually have when we're working on narrative stuff, they have a nice hot catered breakfast for us.
Sure.
Well, we had just cellophane wrapped bagels, and we're in New York, but no fresh bagels. But when the still people would come, they'd have a hot catered breakfast. And they wouldn't allow the regular crew to get through the hot catered breakfast. And I said, wow, fuck that. I'm happy. And that it was soon after that I actually walked.
Good for you. Wow. That's disheartening. Let me put it that way to hear all that. But wow. Well, onto more interesting and happier things. So part of this podcast is a big part of this podcast is sort of passing on to newer operators and people up and coming information that can actually help them. So, considering you're the first mixer that I've had on the show, which I'm so excited to finally have a mixer on the show. This is a show. I don't know if this is a show on the podcast. The show sounds
it's a show. Big. Let's pretend it's a show.
You know what? Let me hand it over to the band in the background for a minute while I take a break. What makes a good operator for you as a mixer, and your team for you as a mixer, you as a boom operator? What traits does a good operator have, and or what traits, if you think of bad operators, you don't have to say any names, what traits do they have? What works?
I had a lot of trouble imagining what I could say in answer to your good question.
Okay.
The fact is, as you noted very early in our conversation this morning, that we didn't chat much.
Yeah.
And the fact is, sound mixers don't have much intersection with operators. I'm just grateful at the end of my career that I had only one operator who would throw my boom operator under the bus and tilt up to see a boom in the shot to say, oh, no good for boom's in shot. Yeah. Only one. But the fact is, my intersection was mostly with the second AC.
Sure.
Because we'd have to conform our prints. And early, my first intersection with the camera department on a show would be an email to the first AC saying, "Hey, I'm Jan. Let me know who your second is so that we can get the slate plates made, and I can tell you what kind of slates I've got and that kind of thing." But honestly, I didn't have. You were the first and maybe only operator with whom I had any meaningful contact.
Seriously?
Yeah, I mean, there were some with whom I'd have breakfast every morning. The one guy who would come as early as me every day.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But other than that, like on set, so if I don't hear from you, it's all good. As a mixer, and if you're not poking my boom operator, giving my boom operator trouble, then you're excellent.
Well, but that said, you obviously hear stuff from the boom operator and you hear what's going on set. Are there things that you've noticed that maybe it's a better question to say, what do camera operators who you don't appreciate working with, what do they do? I mean, you mentioned pointing up and making sort of throwing the boom operator under the bus, but are there other things that they shouldn't do or should be aware of?
Well, having a really good working relationship with the boom operator, assuming that I've chosen a personable, knowledgeable guy, and I think Brendan and the other, Gideon Jensen is another top-notch boom operator that I've worked with. They have a really good operating relationship with the operators, because when there's an issue, they always have solutions in their pockets. They're not just coming up, hey, this is fucked up. Because Nurse Jackie had a lot of reflective surfaces. With
it's always the death.
glass.
Yeah.
And I think the first season of Nurse Jackie, Brendan was kind of a deer in the headlights, because this was his first job, as it was kind of my first big job.
Yeah.
But when he came back the beginning of the next season, we were in the most reflective set. And I said, so, after the rehearsal, I said, so what do you think? And usually I'd have to wire some people because of it. He goes, no, I got this. And what had happened with him is, in the intervening months between that previous season and this season, he had worked on a show called Black Mirror. And
okay.
he knew his reflections,
his angles. That's great.
Yes. So he could deal with it.
It makes sense that you say that, because, as I mentioned earlier, we did Happyish together, which was only like 6 months or something like that, or 5 months.
Yeah, it was really, really short.
And I had a great deal on that because my deal was I came every other episode, which I loved. So I traded off episodes with another steady camera operator. So I got time in and time off. And Ben Cutchins was the DP, who was fantastic. And I met
Nice
you guys
guy.
there. But I remember the day that I met Brendan, I remember going, this is going to be someone that I'm going to enjoy working with, because he was smart and he was fun. And the big thing that I remember as an operator, I'll tell you from my perspective, is because I don't remember what it was. It was about an advertising agency,
Yes.
or a couple actually, maybe there are two of them. But as such, they were like these nice sets with a lot of glass. And I remember just the first time we were in one of those sets, we lined up the shot, and the second that we were starting to talk about camera placement, he was right next to me, and I think he even had the boom pole, and he was sort of putting it out there. And I remember immediately going, oh, this guy is not only trying to figure out the angles, but he's also showing me where he is, so I can keep it in mind. And I was dead on right that I don't take credit for it. It's because of him. That he was like, every time there was a problem, he was right there to go, well, what if I did this and you could do this? And I'd go, well, can you do this? And I remember we did some great stuff. There's one scene I remember in particular where we couldn't get out of it. And I just remember him saying, well, if I hold it straight, does it look like one of those architectural lines in the background that's reflecting? And I said, yeah, can you hold it still there? And he said, at the point that you come through it, I can lock and hold there. And that's exactly what we did. And he's in the reflection, but you have no idea. So he was such a pleasure. And he was just a good person. And didn't he fall through? Am I crazy? Did he fall through a ceiling on a set or something? What happened?
Broke his leg.
He broke his, oh my gosh, that's right. He was like, he had surgery, or there was something big that happened.
Yeah, he fell through a hole in the ceiling and broke his leg. And it was like the last day or next to last day.
That's why I don't. Yeah, it was right at the end. Oh, and that was. Oh, and that was terrible. But obviously, he's gotten better from that. So
yeah, he has, and moreover, he's also a writer and a producer, and he produced and wrote a feature film that opened Sundance.
Get out!
I'm kid you not.
What's it called? Do you know?
It's called Birth/Rebirth. You can get it online if you Google it.
Yep.
And it continues to get great reviews, great things happening for him and his writing partner Laura Moss, who directed the film.
That's so great. Oh,
Isn't it great?
Makes me so happy to hear. I'm going to watch that, and then I'm going to reach out to him. Oh, that's fantastic.
You must.
I love that. That's just great. So, one thing we haven't talked about is you have a whole nother life in the world of art. Can you just tell us a little about that? Because I was reading your IMDb bio, which we found out says that you've worked on over 700 productions, which doesn't seem right. And you mentioned you're going to try to change. IMDb is just like, I don't know where they get their information from, but it mentioned all these major art museums that you've curated for and that you've been involved in. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it's just, I at one point I was an honest to goodness poet and put a lot of my energy into that. As I mentioned earlier, I started taking film courses because I needed to learn the language of film. I realized I didn't know how to speak film, probably still don't, but making poetry films became an imperative for me because it seemed to me that the rhythm, music of poetry would lend itself beautifully to filmic expression.
Uh-huh.
And so I did a lot of those things.
Is there stuff that you can give me links to that I can link in the podcast bio?
I'll try to remember to send you. I'll take a note.
I'll bug you for it. That'd be great. I'd love to see them. I haven't seen these. And then I mean, it listed off a lot of pretty major art museums that you worked with over the years.
Yeah, that was in part due to the fact that I was married to an art historian, and who was also my poetry collaborator, and so he was well hooked into the whole museum world, and sort of helped that happen.
Uh-huh.
So we would get shows and things, and that was a big important thing. But when we divorced, I gave him the poets. He got the poets, and so I kind of unplugged from poetry
You
generally.
pulled out of that. Do you still write poetry?
No, after a while, since he got the poets, I sort of stopped writing and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
And how long have you been retired now?
My last day was in December of 2019.
Do you miss it?
No,
You
no,
want to take
because
a minute to think about that?
oh, did I take a minute? No, I did not. It was no, I don't miss it at all. The lack of respect that my craft is getting these days, and was, I mean, I knew it was time for me to retire when well, there were two little episodes in the end of this CBS show with Edie Falco as number one on the call sheet, called Tommy, that I was working on. And so I'm having lunch with the post-production supervisor, and they were concerned because I wasn't wiring everybody all the time. I was only wiring them when I felt we needed it.
Yeah.
And the post-production people were concerned, but they expressed themselves with a lot of elan. I thought nobody was accusatory, but the post-production team came and visited me on set and watched me. And so as the culmination of that little flurry of events, having lunch with the post-production guy, I said, well, fuck CBS and all their post-production baggage. I actually said those words out loud to him. And
Oh.
I said it and we giggled at the time.
Yeah.
I said it with a little different inflection, but so I continued to do like I do, which is wiring people or putting a plant when I needed to.
Yeah.
And there were no bitches, and the show sounds great. I don't think it cost them anymore, but that it's just not what they were used to.
It's about control, a lot of it, right? They want to have absolute
fear.
everything, or fear. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I sort of laughed when you said no so quickly, because I think if you're in the same boat that I am, if I were to get out today, I don't know that I'd be too upset because of what things have become, but I would miss what it used to be like, where it was, we were given time to do things and there was respect for the process and this and that and the other. And even you mentioned, someone seeing the boom and tilting up to show everybody that the boom's in there. One of the good things about the way it is now is, I mean, I was always the person who I would never scream out boom because maybe they could, use a different take or something. I don't want to blow things. But now you can easily take that stuff out. So you let it go. And if someone else gets upset, they can say something. And then you go over to the boom operator and you go, hey, I misframed there and you were in. Can you just give me a couple inches? Because I think I'm going to probably do that again or whatever. But so there's some good things that have changed, but it is a lot about, there's been a lot of, there's less of a respect for the craft that we all do, which is too bad. It's become about data gathering somewhat and all that. But not to spend too much time on a down note. What when you look back on your career, is Nurse Jackie the highlight? What's the highlight, or are there a couple highlights like of the things that you enjoyed and or the things that you were proud of being a part of?
Well, for sure, Nurse Jackie, and also Divorce was exceptional with Sarah Jessica Parker. There were some feature projects that really kind of rang my bell. There was one with Christopher Walken, and it was one particular scene where he has a long soliloquy that he delivers that begins at the top of a staircase in a beautiful old house. And I had set a plant mic at the bottom of the stairs because it was only a two-man team and there was no way a boom could get in there. So I wired him and also had this plant mic, and he delivered an exceptional performance. And it was that scene for me that at the end of it, I knew I had gotten it, and I'd gotten him beautifully. So when I went
Yeah.
to unwire him, I said, I got it beautifully, sir. And that was a highlight to me.
That's fantastic. It's that sounds like one of those scenes where my thing is always when I take my eye off the eyepiece and I'm actually moved on some level or something has they've stirred something. It's always an amazing thing for me to be a part of that. Is it the same thing for you for sound when you nail something like that and it just is perfect?
Absolutely. And I lived for those moments, but it happened less often,
Yeah, it's fleeting.
if at all, on TV,
Yeah,
because
there's no time.
there's no time.
No,
Yeah.
I totally agree with you on that. It's funny because we were talking about you being a poet, and now this tracks. I don't know if you remember, but on Happyish, Heather Norton was the first AC, who was great, and she and I talked to them about safety. And I don't know if you remember, but we asked early on if the safety meeting could be done, unless there was like a stunt or something like that. But if the safety meeting could be done by different crew members, because we thought it would give ownership to the crew. And so you remember this, and like some people came in. I remember the PAs did a rap, I think, at one point, which if I can find, the last day, I think. But you did it once, and I think you did it. Did you do it in iambic pentameter? Am I crazy, or did you do a show tune or something?
I think I did a show tune.
It was great. It was like this big soaring thing, but I think you might have done two because I think I remember something in iambic pentameter. Maybe you tried it, but it was a show tune, and maybe I have a video. If I have a video of that, I'm going to post it because it was fantastic.
Well, that was a lot of fun, and that was the greatest idea ever, David. Seriously.
It was. I think Heather may have come up with it, but because our feeling was that the safety meetings. Look, the AD does the same thing every day. And so they drone on and they're like, I got to check this off the list. And nobody listens because it's like, okay, now's when the AD says about the fire lanes and this and that and the other. And we just thought, well, if the crew did it, they would sort of make something of their own. And I think that was just sort of a perfect storm of that crew. Like we had such wacky people on that show, and the show itself was so wacky that
it was so wacky. And
it was.
Honestly, that was one of my favorite sort of storylines, and just everything about the show. The cast was kind of wonderful, and
it was a great it never kind of took steam, unfortunately, but I think it's out there somewhere. It's worth watching.
Oh yeah, and I've watched it a couple times, and I'm still actually in touch with Orly, his wife, and
okay,
God, his name is escaping me at the
Shalom Outslander.
Shalom, yes.
I actually just saw. I have to email him because I just saw him at a coffee shop before I left LA, and I told him I was going to get in touch with him, but I need to. But he's a fascinating guy, just in and of himself.
Oh,
the thing amazing. I remember about that show was, for anybody who hasn't seen the show, the storyline was about this ad executive in New York, and Shalom was an ad executive or copywriter or something like that. I don't remember. And the storylines were just outlandish, and I remember I would go to him after we shot something just crazy, and I'd go, that can't actually be from reality. And he'd go, oh no, that actually happened, almost word for word. And it's just like, it was unbelievable. I mean, the one that I really remember the most was we shot that scene where the guy brought in, it was like the Nazi handbook on how, I forget, it has a name, but on how like a way to dress and how to present the flags and this and that and the other. And he was sort of using it as an example of how this was, they succeeded because they were organized and this and that and the other. And I remember going to Shalom Auslander and going, that's made up. You made that up. And he's like, that happened absolutely in a meeting. And I went, oh my God, it sounds like a crazy world. Well, anyway, this has been such a joy to talk to you and to catch up with you and hear from you. So thank you for being here. I'm going to leave you with the question that I leave everyone with, which is someone younger getting into the business, someone who's trying to move up in the business, you when you were younger, what advice would you have for them on how to succeed in the film industry?
Yeah, you're afraid. Do it anyway. Call them. You have a seat at the table. I never thought I had a seat at the table, and then I woke up one morning and And for some reason, that sentence came to me, and I'm like, I have a seat at the table. So I went to the DP director's trailer and just waltzed in and just, started talking to them like, oh my God, I have a seat at the damn table. And it was a huge revelation to me, and I would give that to you as my gift, young filmmaker.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Don't forget to check us out on theop.io for all sorts of information on operating and storytelling. So thanks for listening and have a great day.